Secretary, is this a change in U.S. foreign policy?
Well, I think it is. President Trump campaigned on a basis that we were going to have America First policy, that we were going to have basically building our infrastructure back up. We're going to have nation building at home here in America. So the reality is that even though we don't like what's going on in the world is not going to walk away from us. It's going to come to us in one form or another. And so I think this is a change. I think it's a positive change on the part of President Trump to understand that we can't simply become isolationists as such. We can't simply retrench and come back into a continental cocoon. That the world is a dangerous place and things are happening which require an international response. Most of the time that international response will probably be led by the United States, as it should be.
The problem, Secretary Cohen, is now what? Does the president continue to strike if Syria doesn't back down? You know, what does the president do about relations with Russia, which appears to be now backed into a corner? Putin certainly doesn't like being in this position, and the likes of Iran and other countries.
Well, we reach out to Russia, but we reach out on the basis that we're willing to do business with you, but not on your terms. You can't annex. I was really struck the irony of the Russian spokesman saying this is a violation of international law at a time when the Russians annexed Crimea in violation of international law, at a time when they're destabilizing Ukraine in violation of international law. So the notion that we are violating international law and being accused of doing so coming from the Russians is rather ironic. But I think that we want to have a better relationship with Russia, but we can't do it on their terms. In this particular case,
why did President Trump decide to do this? Why now? Clearly those photographs came out this week and there was a terrible attack, as there has been, you know, at several occasions in the last several years. Yet in Mar-a-Lago with the Chinese president there and, you know, the potential for, you know, conflict in North Korea as well, is there any timing issue here?
I don't think it was timed deliberately to take into account President Xi Jinping. I think it was important that President Xi saw President Trump. I was just in China for about 10 days a couple of weeks ago. And the Chinese want to do business with the United States, and they understand the relationship has to change, especially on trade. And they have to understand that we cannot sit back idly and allow Kim Jong-un of North Korea to continue to develop missile technology and nuclear weapons that will one day have the capability of striking the United States. So I think it was important. The message was, we mean what we say, that we cannot allow this to take place. So President Xi, will you work with us so we can persuade either the Kim Jong-un regime to change its course, or we work together to find a different regime. That would be the message, I hope, that was conveyed to President Xi.
Secretary Cohen, what would your best guess be for the next step in this conflict surrounding Syria? Does civil war escalate? Does the Russian government decide to do something? Do we do something else?
Well, I think the Russian government should be sufficiently embarrassed by what has happened, since they were the ones who claimed that they would eliminate all of the chemical weapons held by Bashar al-Assad. They didn't do so. They failed to do so. And frankly, there's circumstantial evidence that would indicate that they knew that that sarin gas was being loaded on those planes, and they have people, Russian people, on the ground with them. So I think the Russians have a lot to account for, and that this ought to be brought before the UN Security Council. It ought to be debated and say, President Putin, you need to do a much better job with your client state. And so we'll see what happens from that point on in terms of what Bashar al-Assad decides to do.
So what would happen if Assad were to step down, maybe not immediately, but, you know, as a result of U.S. pressure? Who leads Syria, and what happens with the civil war there?
Well, there has to be a brokered peace. It's clear that as long as he's in office, there's not going to be one. So we're going to continue to see the war play out with more and more thousands injured, people displaced, 5 million to date, but more coming. And so it's critically important that this be resolved peacefully. It's not going to be resolved by bombs and bullets. This was an important step by President Trump to send the signal that you have crossed a line recognized by everyone in the world, hopefully including the Russians, that chemical weapons, sarin gas, is not something that we can allow any nation to use, no matter where they are or where they're located.